We're recording.
Everybody, call this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. on March 22nd, 2023. The Greenfield Charter, Chapter 7 and 8, 7 and 7-8 Review Ad Hoc Committee. I'm going to take a roll call. David Singer here. Catherine?
I'm here.
Okay. Derek?
Mhm.
I know Derek hasn't been well. Danny here. Isaac?
Here.
Not yet. Albert here. Okay.
Here.
Quorum. So here's a chair's statement. This meeting is being recorded by the Charter Chapter 7, and 7-8 Review Ad Hoc Committee. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. Okay. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, subsection G, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of a public body. So I hope everybody understands that. This is not open to public discussion, but we're very happy to have the public here listening. Okay, so no public, oh, the minutes. Al, I know that you made a mention today. So I make a motion to approve the minutes of the January 12th, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
I hear a second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Anybody have any amendments to the minutes?
Yes, David, I had one. I didn't see this anywhere, but maybe I just didn't see it. But I wanted to add the language, one sentence that said, quote, "The idea of allowing voters to seek a referendum when the city council or school committee approves or disapproves of a measure was discussed." The words "or disapproved" would be added to the minutes. That sentence would be added. I didn't see it anywhere. I know we discussed it, so I just thought it should be added back to the minutes.
Okay.
That can be a,
Not to be, I'll second the motion to amend. Everybody okay with it being amended as we vote?
yes.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as amended by Al, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Okay. So everybody's been waiting to tell their story. So the sequence that's been set up, if and you can pass if you wish, was to just have everybody speak based on their good follow through with providing something for each of us to think about. So thank you very much for the hard work there. So on my agenda, it says Catherine would be the first one to speak about it. So Catherine, floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So the two part, they're a little like changing town to city, of course. But the two pieces of this, I want to say, serve the purpose, multiple purposes. Two things that I think are really important are, one, that it should be relatively easy for citizens to bring a petition. I don't think that it should be that hard. And two, I do think that citizens should demonstrate that they're ready to organize to get something passed before they put something on the ballot. And so in order to meet those two objectives, the two main parts of my proposal are that, one, in order to bring a petition to city council, citizens need to gather 150 signatures of 150 voters. And that, two, then if their initiative is not passed by city council, that they need to gather an additional 450 signatures, and that 50 of those would be from each precinct. And this number is significantly less than some of the other proposals, because I don't think that people should have to gather that many signatures. But I think the work that is entailed in gathering them from precincts and not just asking friends or people who people already know demonstrates that people are ready to work to get something passed. Those are really the two main parts of what I'm proposing. And also, I think that we've talked a lot about simplifying the numbers, and this proposal does that. So that it's not super complicated. 150 and 450 are pretty simple numbers.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah,
Are you done?
I am.
When you say relatively easy to bring a petition,
Mhm.
what can you relate that? Can you peel that onion back a little bit? What do you mean by easy? What's easy?
Yeah, I think that it shouldn't take weeks and weeks to gather the signatures. I think that we shouldn't have to, I mean, we shouldn't have to get 10%. It should, people should be able to gather people who are in support of what, share similar thoughts, and take a couple of weekends to get this done.
So that was what you had in mind when you thought
Mhm.
about those numbers?
Yeah, it is what I had in mind.
Okay. And as a corollary, you think the numbers that are now in the section 7.7 are not easy?
No, I think that they're burdensome. And I do believe that there should be ways that people can more directly participate.
Okay, thanks. Anything else?
No, that's it for now.
Good, thank you. Very thoughtful.
I'm sharing the screen according to the each
Oh,
individual's.
thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's really helpful.
I know it's hard for people to read, but since the person's summarizing, I thought it's okay to kind of try and follow along.
Okay, next on the list is Al.
I'm next.
Yes.
So I have some similarities to what Catherine just suggested. My starting point was to begin with the notion that these initiative measures need to be practically usable by the community. We don't have a lot of them. Historically, we haven't had a lot of them. I think the very first iteration of citizens initiatives in the councils was outrageous. I mean, it was very difficult. It was 15% of total voters had to be put together under the original 7.7, and that was modified over the years and brought down, because I think that the original 15% of total voters today would be a very significant amount of signatures to get, and in fact, it would be approximately 2,000 votes, 2,000 signatures. So I think over time we've evolved down to a figure that's more reasonable. And in November of 2021, when the voters voted no on changing, no on section 1, which was, I'm sorry, question 1, which was to raise the number of signatures higher for referendums, that the actual plain number of signatures was around 336 or 37. What I've done is I wanted to have a number that was somewhat similar to that, because I think these two, I agree with what David has said about in his memo. He said that people may have seen, he suggested that there was a balancing that would take place between 7.7 and 7.8, that the voters basically could have the same mechanism to challenge a vote, whether it was an initiative or a referendum, of 2.5% of the total voters was the minimum. And that figure and today would be around 300 and 330, 340 signatures. And I wanted to, as we said at our last meeting, several of us wanted to put the number into plain English, an actual number that people could look at, because one of the drawbacks of the current language is that you don't know what the number is unless you look it up. You have to call City Hall and find out how many voters voted last time, or what total number of voters we have. It's just not very transparent and simple to use. So I think that's what Catherine is talking about in terms of why something would be a simple thing to use, or not, the word easy isn't really correct, but the number 400 is what I came up with as the process. And the difference, I think one of the major differences in what I wanted to do with citizens initiatives was I wanted to make it similar to referendums, in that there not be a two-step gathering process, which I've always had a problem with. I've heard people complain about that as being an impediment for voters who want to get something started and onto the ballot, that the business of supplemental signatures, it really doesn't add anything to the proposal. It actually makes it dilatory. It drags it out for several months more. And it leads to a situation where I was reading David's thoughtful comments about why these things are what they are. And I was looking at comments like the note about an initiative petition. This is David's quote, the council gets to a decision that is agreeable to all the power sources by voting yes, no, or producing a compromise. Or if no compromise is reached, the matter can be decided by the ballot. The issue for me is there is no compromise process in the current ordinance in section 7.7, because what happens is if you gather your first number of signatures, whatever, and the city's lawyer says, yeah, this can go on the ballot, it's legal to be voted on, then it goes to the council, and the council, unfortunately, has three options. I think they should have two. They can approve it, they can disapprove it, or they can amend it. And then amending the initial petition as they received it is considered a rejection. So basically, that there are two forms of rejection: just outright rejecting it, and then amending it, which is tantamount to a rejection. So, and then the interesting part is that once that happens, the council is out of it. They're not brought into this anymore. And the citizens can do, I tried to actually craft language in the thing that was on the screen that people might be able to refer to from what was in the full agenda. I tried to come up with some language, which I later decided was foolish, but the language was that, what if the petitioners committee, which is really 10 people, what if 8 of them said, you know what the council came up with when they rejected it, when they amended it, actually wasn't that bad, and we could live with it. How could the citizens then at that point jump in? And I tried to come up with a mechanism where 8 out of 10 of the original petition signers would say, we're fine with it. But then I realized that's really open to criticism, because it would just be 10 people, which is as objectionable sometimes as having 13 people make the decision. So I thought, no, that's really not, I don't really like that. And so what I submitted in my version here, I said later to myself, this doesn't work. The problem is that once you have the city council rejecting you, there is no compromise. There's no language that allows citizens to then say, well, we like what they came up with, or we still don't like it. And then you're supposed to go out and gather a bunch of supplemental signatures. So all the stuff that David had written about being able to reach a compromise, I thought this is not it. This ordinance that we now have, section 7.7, doesn't allow compromise at all. It allows the council to reject something, and then we tell people, okay, citizens, you might have thought you get approved or disapproved. You didn't know when you started gathering signatures, but now you have to go out and gather a number of additional signatures. And I think that's where it differs than a referendum, because you already in a referendum, you already know that the council has rejected has proposed something, and now you're proposing the opposite. So you already know that what the dynamics are when you go to vote. You either want to raise the number of signatures or you don't. That's what happened in 2021. So I think the supplemental is particularly inappropriate in this situation because there is no further compromise. It doesn't lead to any kind of compromise. And in fact, what I point out in my memo is that after the memo that I sent out earlier today is that after you're at the point where the city council has said no, if they reject something and the petitioners say, well, we'd like it to go on the ballot, if they lose on the ballot, or even if they passed on the ballot, the city council could, let's say they lose it because it's a little more politically more probable. The members of the petition committee go on the ballot and they lose it. The city council then at any time can just step forward and say, okay, you know what, we're going to take some language of our own and write a different ordinance, which is, I think, some of what happened with the plastic bag citizens initiative. It ended up being changed and changed and changed, and finally the city council passed its own version. So the city council has an enormous advantage over the average citizen because the city council at any time can propose its own motion, on its own motion can propose an ordinance, and which is as it should be. And they can in fact do a compromise at that point and say, well, we think the petitioners were wrong, but we think that partially there's some good element here that we can come up with to put into our ordinances. So in fact, the compromise happens after the thing has gone to a citizens initiative vote. So I don't want to prolong the process. I don't want it to last many more months. I don't want to have citizens having to go out twice. I think it's really punitive. And so I feel comfortable supporting a one-step petition gathering process, just as we have with referendums. And I also, wanted to note that that whatever number, I think it should be a plain number. And at the end of the discussion, I think I've also added the notion that I wanted to see language put into the ordinance that said that every decennial review, in other words, every 10 years, that number could be changed. Not have to be changed, but that the charter review committee then, that would be in effect, let's say in 2030, would be able to change the number to one that they like, and it's more palatable to them and have the reasons for it. So I think those are some of the main points that I had in 7.7. Not sure I left anything out, but there are some other nuances in there. But basically, a one-step process. Get rid of the supplemental signature requirement. I'm okay. I'm not thrilled with the idea of 50 from each precinct, only because I'm not a big supporter of precincts in general. But I think a number in the range of what I suggested here, 400, and with the idea that you could revisit the number at the next decennial review. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks. Any questions of Al?
I have some questions.
Hi, oh, Isaac is now present. Hi, Isaac.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had some trouble logging on.
That's fine. I know that. I know how that works.
Al, first of all, for the number to be changed, if it's made out of a number of the charter, it requires an act of the legislature. And the entire charter is reviewed every 10 years anyhow. So what you're asking for as far as the decennial review already exists. So you've already got that. But my question is
I correct. I wasn't asking for a review. I'm sorry.
Please. Thank you.
But my question is about you feeling that there is no opportunity for compromise and that there's nothing that petitioners can do after something's gone to the council. And is it the answer if they're satisfied, they simply just don't go out and collect the additional signatures? Isn't that the answer?
Well, I think that if they're rejected, they have no choice but to do that. But I don't consider that a
No,
compromise.
no, but they
You're
don't
saying-
have to go, Al, they don't have to go out and collect them. They can, but it's not mandatory. If
Oh,
they
you're
don't want
saying
to
that
go on the,
I'm sorry, you're saying that if they like what the council has done,
yeah, they
Yeah,
don't
if
have
they-
to go the next step.
yes, they could. They could say we like what the council has done and it stops there. But the question is, who is the we? Who has the power to do that? That's what I got hung up on, is that I proposed that the petitioners committee would be the one to do that. If they could gather 8 out of 10 people, the language that I put in my version was that if 8 out of 10 people, that which would be like a super majority, if they said, hey, we're fine with this, then they could drop it and say to the council, thanks, we're all set. But I didn't like the fact that if I wasn't one of the 10 people anointed in the original petition, I'm left out. All those other signatures that they got would say, hey, wait a minute, we don't like that. We wanted more than just plastic reusable bags. We wanted X, Y, or Z. So I don't think.
Isn't that part of the privilege of being the petitioners committee? Otherwise, why have a petitioners committee?
Well, I mean, the petitioners committee, I don't think anybody really knows what a petitioners committee is entitled to. I mean, I started thinking that if I seriously proposed a petitioners committee, someone could legitimately come along to me later and say, well, Al, you proposed a solution that involved 8 people. What the heck? That's not great either. That's not much better than 13 people making the decision. Maybe it's even worse. So I know what you're saying, but I ultimately rejected my own idea, which was to have the petitioners committee be able to say, we're okay with this.
Yeah.
Isn't the petitioners committee the people who are generally
Wait,
the 10 people who are most committed to the particular issue?
No, not necessarily. They could be they
Isaac,
could be 9 of my friends.
Isaac, do you have any questions?
Well, I think they're self-selected people. So my question, I'm trying to understand how Al doesn't think that there's an opportunity for what you're saying. If I understand this correctly, Al, your concern is that a majority of the people may not like the compromise, but may not be able to go forward afterwards because the committee that started the process does not go forward. Is that your concern?
Well, that's one of them. But the other one, Isaac, is that if the ordinance said that after I went out the second time and gathered another, whatever, 300 or 400 signatures, if it said then the council will vote again, then maybe there's some compromise there. But the council is out of it at that point. It goes right to the ballot. So in other words, if the council doesn't come up with at the initiation stage, doesn't come up with much of a change at all, they just say, yeah, we'll change X, Y, or Z in a minor way, but we reject it because any amendment is considered rejection. At that point, they step out. And one question is, so who has the power? The petitioners committee to say, no, don't do that, we're fine. I'm not sure they should, because that's a very small group. And the second thing is that the process of getting additional signatures doesn't lead to any kind of compromise. It leads to a ballot. So I don't understand why you wouldn't just go gather your signatures like you do with a referendum and say, if you're with us, if you vote to accept it, then everything's over. Nothing goes on the ballot, because that's where you have your connection made, where the council says, you're right, petitioners, we agree with you, so we're going to pass it. So then the process ends and everybody goes home satisfied because all the people who signed the petition to do something, the council approved of it. So that's the end of it. But if the council disapproves of it, it doesn't lead to another council consideration. It leads to the ballot. So that, to me, that's not a compromise situation.
All right.
What if the council thinks something is partially right, but not all the way right? How should that be handled?
Well, what my suggestion was that the council, after the process, it goes to the ballot, and let's say that the petitioners lose. the people, the voters support what the council did. The council has the ability the next day to submit another petition, another measure of its own motion that does more what the council felt was in keeping with what the voters wanted to begin with. If it passes on the if it passes at the ballot, it tells the council that they were wrong anyway, and that the voters wanted it to pass the way it was written, the way the initiative was presented.
So you're, go ahead, Al. Go ahead.
Don't you think it becomes politically untenable for the council to do anything in the immediate aftermath of a ballot question that is a binding ballot question?
Well, I think that, if the answer is, I agree with you. I mean, if the council, so when I say that the next day, the council could decide at some point that the voters, the initiative petition came forward, the voters didn't like it. They rejected it. If the voters prevail and they pass their initiative at the ballot, the council is unlikely to want to make a change. But I'm talking about a situation where the petitioners wanted something, the council gave them 70 or 80% of what they wanted, but changed some language, and then it goes to the voters and gets defeated, let's say. And it maybe the council could come back and want to pursue their 80% solution, not as draconian as maybe as or not as progressive, whatever, as the citizens wanted. So I can see a situation where there would be some action by the council. I'm only pointing out that the council has the power to make legislation, and as such, they can do a whole lot. It depends on how the vote comes out. It depends on what the issue was. It's not clear cut to me, but I see no value in having even language in there that says the council can amend it if amending it means it gets rejected. I think just have them vote up or down, and then if the council and the people are voting the same way, then the council probably has a green light to go ahead and do what they want to do. It may not be what the petitioners wanted, but the council can fall back and say, look, the voters voted with us. They didn't want what the initiative petition originally said. They wanted what we were looking at, and so we'll do what they're saying.
Don't you think that it's more economical to have a council pass an 80% solution that satisfies most people and then not have to go to ballot?
Yeah, but when you say satisfies most people, what I'm saying is I couldn't figure out a way to satisfy most people. I could get a petitioners committee to say 8 out of 10 agree with the council, but that's really unfair too.
But the way, go ahead, Al.
Couldn't a new, if there are 10 more people, if there are more people are unsatisfied and they're not members of the petitioners committee, couldn't they just form a new petition?
Oh, yeah. A new petition, Isaac, that would be submitted from the start?
Yeah, and they would be a new petitioners committee, and they can say, no, that group that didn't really represent us.
Oh, that sounds really messy.
It sounds pretty simple to me, but I hear where you're coming from. I'm not sure I agree, but I've asked enough questions. I'll let other people ask questions if they haven't.
I just have a clarifying question. I think I've got it, but this is for Al. So are you saying that the council's role in this process is to vote on the exact scenario proposed by the citizens petition group up or down without editing it? And then if they vote it down, the citizens can either go along the process to get on the ballot, or the council can then start something different instead of amending the thing? Is this what we're saying?
Well, that's one of the things I'm suggesting, that the use of language that says we can amend it, but if we amend it, we're rejecting it. That to me is not very helpful, because because the bottom line is they've rejected it. Now the petitioners committee at that point can look at each other and say, do we really want to go out and collect more signatures at this point, and just say the hell with it, we're dropping it?
Well, I would actually, and I would argue that most groups of people who go through this process and who have, and like you said, there haven't been a lot, but I think most people that have gone through this process would find that having the council say, yeah, but can we just do this, this, and this, and a little tweak here, a little tweak there, would find that to be a very positive response from the council versus saying we have to reject it or
Right,
pass
but-
it as written.
Right, but if that group that's saying that is 10 people, then the criticism arises from the general population of all the folks who signed it saying, what the heck? You know, that we don't agree with, we don't like the 80%. We think it's more like 12% or 10%. You know,
Yeah.
we don't think they've met any of the burden of what we were trying to do with it. And I know that some of that happened with the plastic bag thing, that there
I
were
mean,
a lot
that
of
happens
unhappy
with,
people.
that probably happens with every vote the council ever takes with
Yeah.
a few very slim possible, like, you know, outliers, but like that's kind of like government, right? That's kind of democracy, is that there's always like 30% of the people unhappy.
Well, that's, but I don't, you know, if I was one of the petitioners committee, I would feel really on the spot and have a difficult time saying, well, me and 9 other people think the council's right, so we're ending the whole thing. I think I might feel a little bit
Yeah.
betrayed if somebody had gone around and gathered a lot of names for me and then they call me up and say, Al, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah. All right, I understand.
Catherine, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm following this, and if I am, then I have a couple of questions. Okay, so first of all, I just want to say, when I said easy, I meant particularly to bring it initially in front of city council.
Right.
Like, I don't think it should be hard for citizens to bring something to city council's attention and a request to debate something. I want to be clear about that. And so I'm thinking about these 400 people gather, well, there's a committee of 10, gather 400 signatures. And either it's voted up or down. And then let me see if I'm understanding you, Al. Either it's voted up or down. And if it's voted down, it goes immediately to the ballot. It seems, one question, it seems to me that circumvent, why go to council in the first place if all council can do is vote it up or down, and if it's voted down, it immediately goes to the ballot. Like, it seems to circumvent the seasoning process, the discussion process that is the public debate of going to council in the first place. Second of all, and so that's, am I understanding that? I might, and the second of all, say council passes through that deliberation, passes a 80% compromise. If 8 of the 10 petitioners likes it and doesn't want to keep doing the work of gathering signatures, but 2 do they need to come to consensus, or can the committee still collect more signatures? And if so, why make it 400 to get to council in the first place? If so, for both of those things, why make it 400 to go to council in the first place, but not, let's bring it to council, let's hash it out with a lower number of votes, with a lower number of residents. And then if some of the people on the committee don't like whatever was passed, then they can gather some more signatures. Like,
Well, I
there's
mean,
some, yeah.
well, we already have a process that allows 100 people to bring in a petition to the city council to initiate something. We have some mechanism like that already, and the council could say, not a bad idea, but we want to change X, Y, or Z. And that's not a big, that's a process that actually should be probably used more. But that would allow the council to, without forcing people to be spending a lot of hard work over weeks and maybe even a month or 2 of gathering signatures, it allows them to come in with a number of people saying this is something that we want, and the council can take action on it. Now that's section 7.6, I think. But the council, that could be amended also to require the council to do more than under that section. The council can just say, thanks for coming in, have a nice day. They don't have to pass anything. They don't have to act. Acting can mean table. They can table it. So we already have a mechanism that sort of allows that. But this mechanism, I think, is for people that are really, they've really come up with an idea that they're on fire with. They think is really a great idea for city government, and they want to bring it. And then they encounter some confusing language where the council says, not really. we're going to do something similar, but not really. But it's a rejection. So you have the choice of either stopping now or go out and gathering another, several hundred signatures. To me, that's like it's not really worth it, because the council can't negotiate with you at that point. You either take what they have come up with as their compromise, or go out and now have to go back out on the streets and collect even more signatures than the first time. And I would say just get all the signatures that you think that you need, which is similar to a referendum level, actually higher than what we have now in referendum. Have them do that. Have them go to the council. Have the council say, we don't like it. We think we think we could do some work with this, but we don't like this version, and reject it. And then the petitioners decide, do we want to go on or not? And probably they're going to want to go on. I don't know if I answered your question, Catherine, or not.
Not exactly. But my follow-up is slightly separate. Like, I don't understand why people would do 7-6 if they could just almost as easily bring something to council that then had the potential to go on the ballot. Like, why use 7-6? Maybe 7-6 is not used. Like, I don't know what the history is, if it has been used, but why not simplify things? So if they're going to do the work of 100 or 150 or whatever smaller amount to get to council, why would people use 7-6 if they could easily get something to city council that then they could have a second step for if they didn't like what came out of city council? This is more of a rhetorical question, but
no, my response would be that yeah, if I can go for 100 signatures and go in and get a discussion going with the council, that's different than 150 that heads towards the ballot. And I think it makes an argument for why would I use 7-6 then at all? That's why I've never supported the very small first step of 150. I'd rather people have to really get going and get 300 or 400 signatures, which is, I know, despite what people think, I don't think is easy. And the people that have done it with me tell me it's not easy. I do agree. For example, Catherine, in your version, there's a 90-day window to gather signatures, which is much fairer than 30. So I believe that over time you can collect more signatures, but adding things like 50 per precinct makes it harder. But I do think that the fact still remains that we aren't encouraging compromise through this process. It looks like it's just go out, we're not ready to give you this, so go out and get more signatures. I'd rather just get it done in one step, because this drags it on for months, an extra 3 or 4 months.
Al, isn't there some benefit in taking some time and deliberating and learning about it through the city council process about an issue? Doesn't that provide some value?
Of course, yeah. I mean, and that's why I think there's also value in the city council seeing what citizens bring to them, because in this particular situation, we're talking about something the council's never seen before, in theory, something a new policy. So I think there's a lot of give and take. That's why I mean, I'd like to see an initiative that comes to the council that they say, yeah, we really think this is a pretty good idea. It needs a little bit of tweaking, and we propose that. And then the petitioners committee may say, we don't want to go out and gather another bunch of signatures. It's not worth it to us to fight with you over the small difference of opinion. But I just think that
isn't that what we have now?
you mean with the supplemental?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna load the big end of the supplemental on the second phase, I think you're discouraging people from continuing anyway. I mean, I think people.
I'm not talking about the numbers yet. I'm just trying to about the need for a supplemental petition.
Well, I mean, a supplemental petition, if you, for example, had 150 and 150, I might feel it's not so burdensome. But to me, you're backloading the biggest chunk of signatures after the people have gone in, met with the council, listened to what the council had to say. The council said, no, we're not quite there. But sometimes it's also, no, we're not at all there. You know, we really don't agree with this at all. We don't want to move this forward at all. And if you have to go out and plot and get another 400 signatures, 450 signatures, I think what's going to happen is that citizens aren't going to feel like it's, you know, they're getting anywhere, that once again, city government has not listened to them and turned them away. I'd rather they come in with a convincing show of signatures right at the beginning saying this is a strong idea, because I think that creates an encouragement on the part of the council to say, well, what about it? You know, can we do this?
Isn't that the point of going to the council, to the ballot, is because government isn't listening to you?
With an initiative petition? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
no, not necessarily, Isaac, because the point of going to the ballot, well, maybe if you've gone in, I mean, if somebody went in, for example, I once did a one-person petition, which is also in our ordinance, and nobody even knows it's there, but one person going in, now the city council doesn't have to do anything with that. They can just say, thanks, have a nice day. They don't have to even act on that. But I agree with you that it is helpful for, like, if I had a great idea for an initiative petition, to go to the council one evening and say, what about this idea? Have you ever thought about doing this? And they said, yeah, interesting idea, but you know, we're kind of busy with the Ways and Means budget, so we can't take that up now, maybe in a few months. And maybe I get discouraged and never come back. Or maybe 100 people come in and get discouraged when they hear that it's not going to get taken up right away. I think that we've got a situation where right now people, or historically in the time I've been watching, people aren't particularly that interested in going to city council for anything. The only time they get excited is when the council does something that really irritates them.
Should people who have fleeting ideas or interests be driving policy?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure how to answer. I think that, yeah, I mean, people who care about these kinds of policies more than the average person are probably the people who are going to start gathering signatures.
So the last question I have for you, Al, is, this is the situation I'm most concerned with what you've proposed. Say petitioners come up with a great idea, right? They want to do X thing in town, and they present it to the city council. They've collected all their signatures. They present everything to the city council, and then the city council, in the process of deliberating, learns that doing X thing is going to cause ABC consequences that the petitioners, the people who collect the signatures, never even knew about. They didn't have, they were unaware of the repercussions. And the council, because of the repercussions, rejects it. Doesn't, under your system, it require it to go to ballot even though everyone agrees it's a bad idea?
Well, that's a real hypothetical, hard to answer kind of thing. I would think that the attorney review is designed to show that it's legal to bring this forward.
I'm not saying something illegal, just something that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I'm trying to, you know, I don't know. I mean, in all the examples that I've seen, can you think of any that fit that description? It's kind of hard to just.
Yeah, so say someone says we think you should stop using this particular additive in the sewer, right? And in the process, they find out, well, that sewer additive actually preserves the pipes, and it actually creates better quality health and all these other things. And they learn far more information, right? The people who collected the signatures. Mm-hmm. The average person who signs doesn't know a whole much about the issue generally anyway. They're just agreeing to sign to get the idea forward. But the petitioners once they learn all of these new things that they didn't know, they decide, oh, if we had known that, we would have never gone out and collected the signatures. Now it has to go to ballot, and is it worth doing that?
Well, you know, you just reminded me of water fluoridation as an example. You could have some people who really wanted to have their water fluoridated, came to the council, council said no, and, they produced some report that said that this is hazardous for a lot of citizens to have fluoride in your water. And I don't know, I mean, you probably have a group of people who would want to move forward anyway with the
Mhm.
petition and say, we want the water fluoridated. And we don't care what Dr. X, Y, or Z said, or what the Board of Health said. But you might also find that if that's true, if the Board of Health came out and said, this is terrible, this is going to be disastrous for our health, blah, 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 that measure is probably not going to pass anyway. I mean, it's a hypothetical that I've never seen in my.
You've not seen public and other policymakers not believing the experts? Because I have.
Well, not in the context of.
Not in that
Greenfield-
situation,
Green-
but
Well, nationally is a whole other story at this point. but,
locally.
if you're talking about, if somebody wanted to put on an initiative to not require people to be vaccinated for blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I don't even want to go there. I just don't know what would happen with stuff like that.
But that could
It doesn't
happen.
matter. At
could
that point, it doesn't matter how many times you have to gather signatures and who says what. People are going to do what they're going to do. If they don't believe. Yeah,
I think it
can't
does
answer that.
matter how many, I think the process does matter. I think that's why we're here.
Al,
What
my
now?
question is, when someone's collecting signatures, right, and to bring something to the council or to put it on the ballot, the people who are signing only hear one side of the issue.
Right.
There's no way for them to hear the other side. And so unless there's an opportunity for public dialogue and then an opportunity for them to make another decision and say, no, I don't want to sign that supplemental petition, might we be putting a lot of things on the ballot that only with very limited information presented? And isn't that a waste of time? Even if they fail at ballot, isn't it a waste of everyone's time and effort?
I don't think you're gonna have a situation where going out and doing a supplemental budget educates people any one bit more. I think it's just phase 2 of whatever you were doing in phase 1. And people are, the council has this discussion. The council may say, we don't know. Or I don't, I just don't have I don't have a great confidence in the fact that sending people out a second time to get more signatures on something that they feel strongly about, it does anything except, discourage some people from continuing. And it may be a good cause that we're discouraging.
Al, I'm just asking, I'm not saying it's not a good cause, but doesn't the process of having deliberations at the council, not the signature gathering, the process of having the conversation at the council, doesn't that provide education?
Well, look, if that's the case, I mean, if people feel strongly that that's where the education takes place, then have people be able to get something to the council with 10 votes. And then have them go out and collect 300, 400.
Catherine?
I just don't, if we believe that bringing it to the council is where you start to have the give and take and back and forth, then why are we gathering 150 signatures? Why not just make it 20 and have the council take up these things, and if the people don't like what the council says, then the burden starts. Then they have to go out and collect another 300. I just don't want I don't want an additive number that ends up with 600, 700, 800, 1,000, 1,300 signatures. That to me is where we become not wanting to educate people about what's happening in their community, not want them to be involved, because they see this very high bar that's being set on signature gathering, and a low value set on educational learning, because I'd like to see the educational process be simple, not difficult.
So Al, are you saying it should require less signatures to get something before the council than it takes to run for council?
Oh my gosh. Well, if you're going to get into that, I mean, that number, the number of signatures needed to run for council is abysmal. It's so low. But I think that if you're talking about citizens trying to make their own legislation and get it to the council and getting the council to actually pay attention to them, then I think why ask for, I mean, why ask for 150? Why make people go through that? Why not make it easier to get that first process to the council? I know the council's very busy, has a lot of things to deal with, but honestly, we've had almost no initiatives in the history that I've been here, very few initiatives.
Is
Catherine?
that a sign that people the council's doing a good job?
No,
Okay.
not necessarily.
All right, thanks, Isaac. Catherine?
Okay.
I would like
I
to get a
think-
chance to speak too.
Yeah, I imagine you would. It's a couple things. One, we're talking about a couple of different things. For the most part, we've been discussing whether or not to have two phases. And also there's the question of how many signatures. I want to name, there's two different, there's other questions than that, but those are the
Mhm.
two.
Mhm.
And I do have faith in people that I don't know, I do not think that city council is the ideal venue for deliberation, but I do think that it is the venue for deliberation that we have, where people bring public comment, where people talk about things, or things are hashed out. And I do have faith in people that they could learn through that process. And I mean, I have, other people have, and that could come out of that saying, no, we don't want to keep going. Yes, we do. Oh, we've learned things. And so I don't think it's like, oh, just splitting up the vote, the signature getting process. I do have that faith in people, Al. And I, as an organizer, as an activist, as someone who's been involved, I do think that people should have to do some work to get something on the ballot, which requires work of citizens to think about things, which requires work of the city to get something on the ballot. I think that we in terms of numbers, I don't think that you and I are that far in disagreement. I think that the numbers should be lower than they are. But I don't think that 150, and I'm not attached to 150, but I think that 150 is possible. And I feel personally more attached to having a multi-tier, like multi-phase conversation about things. I do think that that's important. And I have faith in people that is one way that we learn in our city as citizens.
Thank you. So I think that one of the differences, Al, is that it sounds like for you, you see the ballot as some sort of an equivalent to the council, and I do not. The ballot is not an equivalent to the council. It's not that people come before the council, and if the council says, hey, we don't agree with you, then it goes to the ballot. That would create two different forms of government. You'd have what power does the council have in a situation where people come before it and say, take it or leave it? I just find that, I think that's how you envision, it sounds like, our government, that there's like these two separate tracks, it's like the council does its business, but then if people are really excited, 50 people can come to the council and just provide initiatives all the time. And then if the council doesn't like it, then it goes to the ballot. So we'll just have ballot questions all the time. And I see the ballot as a safeguard. I see the ballot as a place where people who are not being given what they need at the council level, after going through quite a procedure to get the council to pay attention, then goes to the ballot and says, you know what, you're not listening, and it's time to go out there and have the citizens tell you, the council, that you're not listening, which is what happened with the biomass. That's exactly what happened with the biomass. So I want to talk about the compromise piece. I guess I wasn't clear in what I wrote, but and people have failed to think about the other piece, which is that if you come before the council with an initiative and the council votes yes, there can be a referendum petition on that vote. So now these people have to go out in 30 days and get whatever percentage they have to get, but yet the people who brought the initiative petition, they don't have to do anything to get it on the ballot. They just have to bring it to the council, no matter what it is, no matter what it says. I'm going to give an example that I think would be a good example for us to talk to. I know that Isaac, you asked Isaac a question. Let's talk about the noise ordinance. We tried to get a noise ordinance passed A lot of people are pissed off about 7 o'clock in the morning, snow blowers and all that stuff. So we went and we mimicked Worcester. And Worcester had a lot of heavy stuff in there, a lot of stuff about what you could not do. And people were on the council were offended by it. So let's say that was an initiative petition. So there are a group of people who are fed up. They grab Worcester's ordinance. They forget the signature piece. I agree with the signature isn't important as the phasing. They come before the council, and it could be a low number of people. They're very, very excited. They're very interested. Now the council looks at it and they see this point of view. People are fed up with noise, but there's another group of people who suddenly see that this is before the council, and they're not happy with about 50% of what's in there. And they're going to referendum that thing if it's approved. So the council has 60 days, and they're sitting there where they've got the initiative people coming in. They've got the referendum people who are definitely calling up and saying, you vote for that, we're going to referendum. So the council invites those leaders to come to the council meetings or talks to those leaders and says, who's cool about this and who's cool about that? And maybe we can produce a piece of legislation that works for everybody. And the reason that the council is forced to do that, which I think is what you want, Al, you don't want this group of people who aren't listening to the public, and that's why you like the ballot, I believe, is that they have no choice but to listen to the people in the community at that point. They have no choice because one way or the other, it's going somewhere. And so a compromise is reached. That power struggle created the compromise because the council had the right to reject the initiative petitioner's petition. And those people who came to the council knew they'd have to go out and get a supplemental, which is a pain in the neck. So why do it? They got some of what they wanted. And the referendum people are saying, good, this is the idea itself is good, but the way it was presented isn't very good. And so you reach a compromise. That's what makes what happened here so wonderful, is that everybody gets a chance to participate. The council at the first level, if you're initiating, then the council has to decide whether it's okay. Other people start getting involved, and there's some compromise that gets reached because of the power that's created by that type of situation. There is in my view, and I'll end with this, the council is powerless if there's no supplemental petition. It's a take it or leave it proposition. And I don't know why we'd want a government that allowed for that, really. And just to show, Catherine and Isaac's ideas of Amherst is a progressive community. And the way that they do this is 250 people can come in and do an initiative. They have a 7-6 like ours, 100 people. By the way, the 100 people in 7-6 is you're entitled to a public hearing. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Council has to call a public hearing on whatever it is you're initiating. So now the public gets to hear it. You can bring 1,000 people to that public hearing if you really are. So, if the council sits there and says, wow, 1,000 people came to a public hearing, we better take this pretty seriously. If 3 people show up, they probably wouldn't take it so seriously, even if it was good. So then you initiate with 250 people. Then they go to the big number. 5% have to supplemental, and the same 5% are referendum, which I actually think is a good number, just to throw in that as a footnote. So now, if these groups don't compromise at the council level, they have to go out and get 5% signatures. That's a big deal. So there's a lot of pressure for people to work this out. If you don't have the pressure from all sides, it's not fair for a group of people to come from a group of citizens and just say, well, if you don't like it, we're going to the ballot. That the ballot is not the place to decide things. The ballot is the place to protest things. You didn't do what we wanted. We're getting a supplemental. We're going to the ballot. We're leaving you behind. And that's what I think is the difference in how you view it and how I view it. And it sounds like some of the counselors and former counselors here view it. And, I'd like to, if the numbers are too big because they're too burdensome, that's a good place to talk about stuff. But you look at Amherst, Amherst has the same amount of voters as we do. It would be 900 people between the first 250 and the next one. You know, 900. Catherine's at, I don't know what number, 600. Isaac's at 600. You're at 400. What's the difference? If I want to say an at-large counselor has to get 100 people on a petition. There are 10 people that need to form a committee. 10 times 10 is 1,000. I mean, 10 times 100 is 1,000. That means that those 10 people that are on the committee have to go out and get the same amount of votes on a petition as somebody running for an at-large position. That's 1,000 people. It's the same tediousness spread out over, I don't know, 2 weekends, as Catherine said. So that's where I am with this. And I felt like my summary was clear about that's why you write the charters the way you do. It's not to suppress the voters. It's to create a balance of power. I'm done.
Can I?
Please.
Well, actually, all my some of my points that I have thought of during this conversation, I think I could go over when I go over my section, because I've sort of changed my mind a little bit since I sent that in. I think a lot of us have. Would you like me to go next?
Please.
Because I am next. I'm bringing up my own copy just because I don't think my track changes showed up on the agenda. So there you go. So and we can get back. I love this lively debate. We can get back to this. But so my homework, product of my homework, as I called it, back, which is now this was January, right? That we submitted these. So it's been a while. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately. It's all here, but I'll summarize kind of my thinking. I have both a numbers thought and I have like sort of a philosophical thought. So the numbers thought starts with, and I think David kind of alluded to this, and Catherine did a little bit too, is that there are other spots in our representative government. There are other places in the charter where you as a person, or you as a group of 10 people or 5 people or 3 people, have an opportunity to bring forward something that you want to see changed by city government. You have a minimum, and I was just counting and I added one, you have a minimum of 6 opportunities, and there's probably others I'm not thinking of. And that is, 1, you can use 7-6. 2, you can literally call your precinct counselor or one of your 3 at-large counselors who you are their constituent. You could probably call the other counselors too, if you happen to have a relationship with one of them, which, being that we're in a pretty small city, that is probably true. And then you can also go to the mayor, whoever the mayor may be, and say, I'm a person who lives in this community. I'm a voter. I had this idea. I think something needs to change. And then the mayor's office could submit it, or could go to the council and say, I want to write this together. There's all these different opportunities before you have to get into 7-7. So before you even get to 7-7, you have at least 6 opportunities that I just thought of off the top of my head to get stuff before them. And all of those opportunities are kind of more of the organic conversation, create the ordinance or change the ordinance throughout the committee process, kind of more of that human touch thing, and less of do this, 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 and this. And I like those because I think those create legislation that please and serve the community mostly. You're never gonna get 100% of the people, but I think those kinds of initiatives where you work on them together as a group end up kind of pleasing the most people and serving the most people. So after that, so now you're in 7-7. So my philosophy behind this, and I'm not even attached to, so when Albert did the sort of summary and showed us how many signatures this actually ended up being, I was surprised at how high mine was, because mine was, I think, the highest. And I am not looking to make it difficult, but what I'm trying to do is balance the place of representative government with activism, because activism and policy work together, but they're not the same thing. And activists' role is to push, and then we negotiate to figure out what actually works. And I think, Isaac tried to make the example of something that could be really bad for the community that, you know, people out in the street in the world who don't work for that department might not know. That the water thing was a good example. I can think of a couple others where it might not be illegal or dangerous, but it would be like really expensive. We have examples of that. Mostly those are state laws though, where it gets passed and then there's no way to pay for it and we are stuck with it anyway. But if the people on the ground had been helping create this policy, it would be different. So that's the philosophy. So my philosophy on it was making it easy, relatively easy. And I think we all agree on this a little bit, relatively easy to bring it before city council. And I say that means the number that I came up with here, we can change this. I'm not attached to it. But not super easy to put it on the ballot, because I do think that, as David pointed out, there are that natural tension between the council and the community to like make sure, and the political feelings of the community make it more likely for them to compromise. So I don't want it to be too super easy to go to the ballot, because then it's just like, take my toys and go home. We're just going to be balloting ourselves to death. I wanted third, which I haven't heard a lot of people say, but I think you guys all said it in a different meeting. I think it should be easy to understand. So you grab the copy of the charter online or in the paper form, and the average person reads this and they're like, what? You know, what? How do we even figure out what that is? I think it being clear language is as making it unclear on how to get the number, even if the number is low, is as bad of a boundary for people as having a really high number of voters needing to sign something. Because if you look at it and you say, I don't even know how I would calculate that, forget it, I'm not going to do it. That's an obstacle. So easy to understand. And that's, I mean that for the average person. So not anybody who's been involved with government or who does this for a living or was a city councilor or is a lawyer. Like a regular person should be able to read the charter and say, I can follow the steps to get something on the ballot if I need to. So those are my things. So what I basically said, and I did this real quick, I with those goals in mind, I said 5% and 5%. So, and I did shorten the timeline for the days, because 90 days feels like an awful long time to me. So though I wanted those to be returned faster. And if it's 5% of registered voters versus something else, I think this section where the number of voters needs to be certified, this would be unnecessary. So this voters voting thing and all of that would go away. And so then the second tier would be the 5%, taking out the number of voters voting and make it just a straight 5%. I'm not tied to that. We can make it a straight number. We can make it a straight percent. I just want it to be high enough that you acknowledge that we already had 7 opportunities in other ways to get things changed in our representative government, but easy enough that if somebody really felt like they weren't being listened to, they could go through this section and say, all right, I can do this. That's my spiel.
Thanks. Any questions from anybody? Okay, thank you. Isaac, you haven't had a chance to give your spiel.
Sure. I don't think my track changes version got sent, just the regular, the corrected version. But essentially, the three things that were of concern to me, one was having a bifurcated system. I think that is the most important thing. And I think at least 4 out of 5 of us, and hopefully at the end of this day, 5 out of 5 of us will agree that there's some value in the council having deliberations on these questions that come to the council. The second thing was the number. I'm not so wedded to a particular number. I think it should be harder to get something onto the ballot than it is to run for office yourself. And I also think it should be, even to initiate that process, I think it should be harder. Otherwise, just run for council and let the voters decide on whether you're a good representative of what they want or not. There is a procedure to get a public hearing. David's correct. It's 100 signatures that get you not just an action, it gets you a public hearing. I have not known the council to ever table a measure that came that way I take action on it, meaning to give it a vote. It may be an amended, it may not be in the form that it comes, but it will get, they've always gotten a vote on that, to my knowledge. Because once you have a public hearing on it, people expect action to be taken. It may not be favorable action, but generally the council takes action on those items. So it's got to be a higher, if it's something that's going to trigger something that's going to go to ballot, it has to be higher than something that to start it, then just requires the action to be taken and a public hearing to be held. So I think the threshold has to be somewhere above that 100. How far above that 100, I don't know. I like 150 because that's the number of signatures you have to collect to run for state rep. I think people who are involved are very familiar with that 150 number. I think it's an attainable number. It's the same number that for one precinct councilor and one at-large councilor to run. It's just slightly above, but not too far above. On the second side, I'm less wedded to what that number would be. It should be substantial because it needs to be. There's a strong section of the community that is dissatisfied with how the council acted in reaction and wants this measure to go as it was initially presented to the council to the ballot. And so I chose 500 because I thought, again, that's a number people are familiar with in signature gathering. That's the number of signatures required to run for any county office. So people who are in the signature gathering game sort of know what that looks like, and they have a feel of what it takes to collect 500 signatures. I could go slow. I wouldn't want to go much lower than that, but I could go slightly higher than that. If I took the numbers as were presented by Al, I think Al gave us a summary of everyone's numbers. And if I took out the high number and the low number and averaged the other three, I think you're at about 750 and change signatures. I could live with 750. I can live with 650. I could probably even live with the 600 that Catherine proposed. Somewhere in that range, I think, shows that there's a substantial number of people who want to see this go to ballot after having heard the full deliberation. The last thing, and I think I'm probably in the minority here because I don't think anyone else has suggested this, is that I think the council should have more time to deliberate. Currently, they have 60 days. I think they should have 90 days. One of these things comes in the middle of budget season. Not much else can really be reasonably deliberated during budget season other than the budget. I'm not saying it can't be, but people are focused on that. And you need to have enough time to consider it. Also, if you need to bring experts in, they're not always town employees are not always available at every town council meeting or every subcommittee meeting. Sometimes they go on vacation. It takes a while to get the people in to deliberate on this stuff. Why I think it's 90 days is a good thing also is there's nothing that bars people from continuing to collect signatures during the city council process, right? While city council is deliberating, I think you can still continue to collect signatures. And so that gives you actually more time to collect signatures rather than less time if you give the council the time to do its action. The last, but I do recognize that my colleagues, I don't think anyone else has espoused that view, and I can certainly live with it the way it is at 60. The last thing that is not in my proposal, but I'm thinking of now, is the one thing our charter does not have a provision for is citizens putting a non-binding question on the ballot. That is, and I would be in favor of a relatively lower threshold for that. Something that for citizens to get a sense of where the community is, or for councilors or elected officials to get a sense of where the community is as compared to, but not have the force of something that's binding. So if you're going to put a non-binding referendum on the state ballot in a state rep district, it's something like 150 signatures. It's very close to what you need to run for state rep. I could see the same thing, 100 signatures to put a non-binding referendum on the ballot. And that is something I think we probably all could get behind. That's all I have.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Yes, Al.
I just wanted to point out for Isaac's background, I proposed 75 days for the city council to review a petition, because I think that I was convinced it was 60, but I was convinced at our last meeting that city councils need more than just 2 normal meeting cycles to be able to review this. And I was hoping that in terms of what we're talking about tonight about education and the give and take of information, I was hoping that the council, when they got a petition, would actually call for the public to come in and talk about it before they make their deliberation, so that people had adequate time. So I actually proposed 75 days. I'm not opposed to making it even longer than that, because I think that's one of the most important periods of time is when the council is processing something that's been brought to them that they haven't seen before. And I think that having a real discussion about it would be important, because that allows people pro and con to come to a hearing and listen to each other talk about what they want. So I was trying to lengthen the period for the council. If I wanted to just expedite this, I would do it in 30 days. But the reason I gave that longer was for that reason. I don't know about non-binding initiatives, Isaac. I remember there was a time when you introduced 3 of them, and they actually were on the ballot. I think there were 3 non-binding non-binding initiatives that you put on the ballot. I forget what year, you might remember, but there were 3 of them at once, and people they went on the ballot, they were voted on, but they were clearly marked non-binding. So I'm not sure we need a permission to do that. I think what's important is they have to be marked non-binding, because I frankly wouldn't want to take too much of my time to gather a lot of signatures for something that's not binding anyway. I'd rather negotiate with people and just to see if you could get it. But I do remember when I went in with 100 signatures one time, I don't even remember the purpose of it, but the council was not particularly, the public hearing is not a big deal. I was at a public hearing the other night that 2 people showed up to. So I'm not a planning board public hearing. I'm not convinced that the words public hearing mean a whole lot in a community unless the citizens are really activated and interested in an issue and coming out. So I think that the importance to me is to not have a process that drags on too long. The part of the negotiation with the council is important to me, and I don't want people to characterize me as being advocating that people go right to the ballot. That's not been my history. If you know what I've been doing in this community for some 4 decades, I very rarely have gone to the ballot as a first option, only as a last option. And to me, that's important to understand, is that it's important to give your legislative body the opportunity to fully discuss and review with people. But honestly, you probably know that I was very disappointed with the industrial zoning vote that took place recently. I couldn't, if I had an opportunity to referendum that, I would have, because I think the voters of Greenfield wanted to have industrial zoning on the French King. And the reason I couldn't is because it was a negative vote. It wasn't an approval vote. So the initiative was gone. The idea of a French King zoning was gone, had to come back. It'll come back via the hands of the planning board. But I think that we're getting into another subject that I did want to talk about at the end of the meeting. But I think it's important that I can't overemphasize the negotiation process, because I frequently have come in again and again and again, trying to say my 3 minutes. It's damn hard to negotiate when you have a 3-minute time clock and nobody asks you questions. So I don't want to talk too much about the negotiation process that happens at the city council. It's not conducive for that. It doesn't work. That's another topic. But I could go, pardon?
Subcommittees is where most of that happens.
Well,
That
look, it
where it
doesn't
can-
even in subcommittees, you've got sometimes the 3 minute. I've been 2 minutes, 1 minute, it's just that this is not, if we really are committed to negotiations, we're not doing it. So I have to take with a grain of salt any discussion about compromise negotiation.
Al, the negotiations happen amongst counselors who are elected officials. They don't happen with the public.
Well,
It would be
that's-
impossible to continually negotiate with the public.
I disagree. I completely disagree, respectfully, but that's not, I have so many times, I have felt that I've come in, said my 3 minutes, and people were doodling, because there's no way of knowing, because no one asks you any questions, no one ever probes. I know that people, I've been up to 11:30, 12 o'clock with the council. And I only had my 3 minutes that night and listened to a lot of discussion within the council. So I think that's part of the problem in Greenfield, is that we need to see the citizens as the people who put us here, and that we want to hear them and we don't want to cut them off. And if you have to go later, there was a proposal at one point to have separate council meetings, followed by the following night to have a council meeting where you didn't have open discussion. I didn't like that, but I do think that we have to put a better premium on what the people are saying. Initiatives are one of the ways that we do it.
Catherine? You have to unmute, Catherine.
I do. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. All right. So I'm just thinking about our process here. I'm aware that I haven't heard your proposal yet, David, and I am kind of taking notes, and I don't want to be part of it. I'm really fascinated by this topic. I think it's incredibly important, and I want to come away from this with an agreement, not necessarily tonight, but relatively soon. I'm on several subcommittee meetings. It's a lot of work, and I'm wanting to kind of reduce their sub issues that we're talking about and see what we have agreement on, see what we still need to hash out. And I could name a couple of sub issues that I'm hearing, if that feels helpful. Okay. One is the ease of understanding. I think that we have agreement on, we want something that is relatively easy to understand.
Can we put that to a poll? Do we all agree that there should be specific numbers?
Good question. Okay.
Specific what? Oh,
Specific.
that's not what Catherine was saying, though. You're
Okay, no, but Isaac put that in actually in more, Isaac said more what I meant.
Concrete.
We've said easy, and Danny's, you had percentages,
I'm-
but you said that you're willing to change that. So
Yep.
one is, we all want specific numbers, not percentages of different things, but
We don't want math problems.
yeah, we don't want to give people math problems. We want to give them numbers that they know what they mean when they read them at first sight. Is that something? Is that okay, David, if I ask this question?
Please.
Okay, do we have agreement on
Well,
that?
So you're
not.
trying, you're at a place of trying to. see what people
I'm the
want.
one who had percentages, and I would happily rethink that for a reasonable number. Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I was going to do was to list the things, but since Isaac asked the question, I'm totally fine with that. So the first thing is just having numbers. Could we have consensus on just having numbers? And we haven't heard your proposal yet, David, but I'm not, so you may or may not be ready for that, but.
I do not, without
Yeah.
speaking on it, I can't reach consensus.
Okay.
I have a reason for percentages that I think
Okay.
is important.
Maybe
So
we
would
can
it
hear
be
from
good-
David first.
Yeah, let's hear your proposal, and I'm happy to name the different sub issues if that's helpful after you share, but I think I agree.
Okay, no, it's not that I couldn't say yes to it. It's just that the reason for it, you have to help me with the reason for it. Here's why I think percentages are fair. if you take a percentage of registered voters as the number, what you're saying is that in essence, every single person who registers to vote also has the right to sign a petition. So by taking a percentage of the registered voters, you're saying that I want to more or less make those two numbers coincide. I have people who have registered to vote, 13,500 people have registered to vote. How many of those people, thinking that they all have the power to sign a petition, what percentage of those people do I want to make as my marker? If I just say 400 people, it just feels like, you know, I could find any 400 people that I need, and that's the end of it. So it feels like there's no correlation between a number like 400. Although you made a correlation, which I could, and then I made the correlation differently, which was everybody who runs for city council has at large has to get 100 signatures, and there's 10 people in the group. I would, a number like 1,000 or 700, 750, if that's where we're headed. But a number like 400 or whatever, that's not doing it for me, because 5% of the registered voters are at least 675 people. So, and then you have the 2.5%, so you have 250. I was thinking 250 plus 5%, but yeah, I could do a number. I could do a solid number. I could join the consensus as long as I was heard on why I want the percentage, but there has to be a correlation. The ease of understanding, the charter committee actually did two excellent summaries of section 7.7 and 7.8 that were appendices that were going to be presented to the city council, but the city council has never really taken up those two sections, having put it into this domain. So I could bring those to another meeting if Catherine's willing to come to one more meeting, but or send it to you anyway, but you can look it up online. Actually, there are two appendices that clearly state how you get from A to B. You don't have to read the statute. You don't have to read the ordinance. I don't know what else. There has to be a supplemental. I can't vote for not to have a supplemental for the reasons that I articulated. And I do think looking at how Amherst does business is a way that I would move. A lower vote to get to the council, that helps with Al's ideas that people are feeling put off. To get 5% of the vote is a hard thing to do. Who's going to really want to do that? This way, if it's 250 people, they can get before the council, and but then they have to do the hard work after. So I don't know. I think my summary. There's one more thing I'd like to say. What time is it? All right, I'm going to just take a minute. The premise for this committee was that because of the vote in November of 2021 and the fact that people did not want to change 7.8, that somehow 7.7 should be changed. I do not understand that connection. To this moment in time, I do not understand that connection. 7.7 and 7.8 were changed by a progressive city council to correlate with each other. Then a group of people came in 2020, got together and said, maybe those numbers are too low. Let's put them up to a higher place. And there was protest. And so a number went out to the community, 7%, and it was rejected. So it was rejected, that's fine. But why the rejection of 7% correlates to 7.7 needs to be changed. I cannot make the connection. And so part of my summary was, and this was part of the way that people framed the discussion with 7.8 during that ballot season was, if it ain't broke, why does it need to be fixed? So everybody said 7.8 wasn't broke. Why is 7.7 broke? 7.7 and 7.8 were written together. Those numbers were written together. Now, maybe 2.5% and 5%, all that stuff could be changed to better numbers or something, whatever. But those two things were written together. And so I don't get why we're here looking at 7.7 because 7.8 was rejected. I still to this day can't understand that. And if we want to say that 7.7 should be changed, then I think we should talk about 7.8 being changed. But nobody wants to talk about 7.8 being changed because the ballot question was, don't change it. So that's where I've given my summary. Based on my summary, except for some of the minor things, I think 7.7 should stay exactly the way it is. People want to do a charter commission, knock yourselves out, change it that way. We can make really good recommendations to the city council. If they want to take it up and the mayor's willing to go along with it, that's another way of changing the charter. But I still don't get how 7.8 being rejected means 7.7 should be changed. That to me is like a fiction.
Can I answer, David?
Of course, who did I think was going to answer?
Well, I have to. I mean, as the person, you and I were, both extremely active in that campaign. And I want to just say that 7.7, as you know, was not, I went to the Charter Commission and I said, please.
Al, please don't just answer why did the vote on 7.8 mean that 7.7 should be changed?
I'm trying to answer.
But okay.
7.7, just so you know, I asked that 7.7 and 7.8 both be put on the ballot. I asked repeatedly for that because I saw no reason why 7.8 should be pulled out, put on the ballot, and said not 7.7, because it was put on by the council of its own on motion. There was no initiative, there was no referendum. The council did that. I didn't understand because I felt like these two things were connected. And here's the answer that I have for you. The people who looked at 7.7, as I did, were troubled by the fact that using today's number of voters, it would take 1,000 signatures to get a citizens initiative on the ballot. That's why people were upset with 7.7. 7.8 was at 337. That's why they probably weren't upset about where it was. So these two items you appropriately pointed out, and I thought it was a good analysis. You're the one who pointed out that 2.5% is the factor by which a city council moves something to the ballot after it's been had its, you called it its initial presentation or something. It's a little bit of numbers there, but your chart that you drew for people showed that once the council had voted on something, it was 2.5% to referend it, 2.5% to initiate it. Yeah, right. You see the 2.5% on both sides. I thought that was an interesting observation. These two citizens measures are very much out of balance. The initiative is 1,000. The citizens referendum is a third of that. So that's why people are saying, back in November, we were saying that don't make it harder, don't make referendums significantly harder than they've been. And on this question, they were saying, that when the commission, the ordinances committee was saying we're not going to do anything because the message was no change. That was not the message. It was said clearly that don't make it more difficult for citizens to have a referendum. Don't make it more difficult for citizens to have an initiative, because citizens want to feel that they're welcomed and involved and engaged in local government. So just on your other one other comment on the point about percentages, I'm glad to hear you say that you're willing to look at numbers. But when I look back at question 1 on the ballot in November, it was all percentages, and I can't tell you, and this happened to you as well, how many people came up and said to me, I don't even understand this language. What are they asking me to do? 10% of voters voting, what versus 7% of total voters. No, people were, I think that one of the reasons that question 1 was so difficult for people to wade through was that no one could figure out what the numbers were. They had to be told. And once they were told, they said, oh no, I don't want that. And I think that's why there was a margin of more people who said they didn't want it to be changed from a lower number to a higher number. So David, these two things never were confusing in my mind about why they were being discussed differently. They are different measures, This one, 7.7, has 2 steps. Referendum has 1 step. This one has significantly more signatures required than the referendum. So they really I think this one, 7.7, is still out of whack. I thought 7.8 was fine. I'm against the supplemental gathering of signatures, as I've said, because I want it to be streamlined, simple, and obvious to everybody what they're doing. And that's why I want a clear number and a clear process. So I don't understand the confusion that might exist, but I don't know if I've answered it for you or not. But these are not twins.
No, I know that you want the community to look at 7.7, and that's fine. But to relate it to the vote on 7.8, there's no relationship. There is zero relationship. And you just said that people were so confused by the numbers that they probably voted no for that reason. So what information did we?
No, I did not say, wait a minute, I did not say that.
Oh, yes, you did.
No, I said they voted no when they were told what the number was, David. I didn't say.
Okay, but not everybody asked what the number was.
No, but you know what I'm saying is that these two items are very different. I didn't put it on the ballot. I wanted them both on the ballot. I wanted people to get a clear understanding of both. I thought we could have disposed of both in November of 2021. I think the voters would have voted probably yes to change, depending on how
you have no idea what people would have done under those circumstances. So
no, but I'm telling you that I'm not the one who wanted these things to be separated. Yeah. I do see the connection, and I like your analogy. 2.5%. That to me.
Go ahead, Isaac.
So, first of all, in my proposal, I actually did address 7-8. I think this committee is charged with looking at both, and we have an obligation to look at both. I agree with you. They should be a mirror image of each other. They should both require the same amount of signatures. If anything, it should be more signatures to repeal something that the council did. But I'm happy. I would be happy with them both being the same amount of signatures. I think that there is I think it is not fair to say that people who voted no on the proposal that was put on the ballot were opposed to raising the threshold. I think they were opposed to raising it that high. I think there are people who wanted the threshold raised, but not quite that high. And the truth is we don't know because it's an up or down question. That's what we have. There was no opportunity there wasn't a menu that people could choose from. And so I think it was a fairly close question. There are a lot of people who did want it to go that high. A substantial portion of the community wanted that high. Some probably wanted it even higher than was proposed by the council. But there are people who voted no who probably would have liked to seen it raised, but not quite that much, right? So I don't think we can make any definitive statements about what the public in general wants based on that. I think what we can say is it's a closely divided community on that issue. That does not mean we don't discuss it and reach the appropriate solution to it. When looking at, I understand where you're coming at on percentages. I caution you, first of all, I'm grateful that you are willing to work with the rest of us and on having a fixed number, because I think that's easier for people to understand. But when talking about what numbers we're choosing, because we're going to eventually get to the point where we're not talking about the process, but we're talking about the actual numbers. I think registered voters is not a good measure to judge by. And for the very reason that you said there's a presumption that anyone who's registered to vote can sign a petition. That is not true. We have a transient population. There are lots of kids who are away at college who are not available during the signature gathering process time, right? They may not be around to sign a petition. There are people who have moved out of the community and have not registered in their new community and no longer live in Greenfield and are available to sign petitions in Greenfield. And there's a substantial lag for those people to get back on. That's why we do a census every year. The registered voters is different from active voters who have filled out their census. So I think that the number of registered voters is a much higher number than the people who are actually available to sign. It's not different from the number who are available to vote because they can all apply for absentee ballots. But to sign petitions, there's a much smaller, or there's a slightly smaller group of people available to sign petitions. And anyone who's gone door to door knocking to get signatures gathered for a precinct race as opposed to an at-large race has gone down those voter lists and seen lots of people who have moved or are dead or away at school and understand that. The final thing I caution us about thinking about is Amherst and trying to mirror Amherst. Amherst is a unique community that has 25,000 students who live in that community and who frequently register to vote in that community, even though they have hometowns that are other places. They actually, a lot of those students register to vote in Amherst for a number of reasons. And one of the things that I think Amherst has done, rightly or wrongly, is put very high thresholds to protect the town from petitions coming forward from the UMass community. And that's just something to keep sort of in the back of your mind when looking at Amherst specifically as opposed to other municipalities. But generally, I agree with 85 to 90% of what you said, David.
Thank you. Actually, Amherst is relatively low. That's why I went for it, because I have listened to Al's and everyone's concerns about the numbers being too high. And I looked at a community that I felt probably was trying to set a barrier for what you're talking about. And it was at 5%, and they have the same amount of registered voters that we do. So it's really, it's 675 people, by the way. That's 5% of the registered voters. But so Catherine, to go back to, actually 2 participants are raising their hand. I can't see the screen, so I don't know who else is
Well,
raising.
Isaac and me, I think Isaac, you're complete, right?
Isaac has his
Catherine?
hand up still.
Your hand is
I'm
still up,
sorry.
but
I don't know how to
think
take it
it's
down.
I can
but
lower your
yeah.
hand for you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Catherine.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
And I can lower
I
my
know
hand
time's
as well.
important to you, so
Oh,
I think
time is really important. I mean,
I know.
I have a 15-year-old and I have 10 ways
All
of
right,
means of
we'll
eating
end
right
this
now.
at 8. I promise.
Yeah,
Well, we'll
please.
end it at 8 and the process, like I'm curious about how are we going to do this?
I do feel like we're getting closer to something.
I do. I good. I have hope too. What I do want to say is, again, very interested that I'm agreeing with you so much, Isaac. But I am agreeing with what Isaac just said. When I was invited to come onto this, committee, it was specifically to look at 7.7 and 7.8. And so I don't agree, David, that nobody wants to look at it, because I am game to look at it. And I have many people that I talk to in around the voting on this that voted one way or another and didn't like either option. Like it wasn't, myself included. I voted for the higher number, but I did not like that option. And I know many friends who voted for the lower option and didn't like that one. So I'm okay with spending the time to talk about 7.8 as well, and to bring them into accordance with each other. And I'm not sure if we want to do that. Like I said, there's another part of me that it's like, where are we getting to here? But I wouldn't say that nobody wants to talk about it. And I would be happy to name the different sub issues that I am hearing, if that feels helpful. Would you like me to do that?
Yeah,
and so I'll name the issues. Let's not try to decide on them. And I would invite,
nobody will say anything.
let's
You
just
go ahead.
see what they are and see if anyone is hearing others. So one is, do we just use straight numbers or percentages?
Mhm.
Another is this biphasic? Are there 2 phases here? Is there a
Wait, what?
supplemental?
Oh,
Are there two phases?
Right, phases, yeah. Sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Then what are the numbers? What are the numbers, if there are two phases, what are the numbers to bring it to council and what are the numbers to put it on the ballot?
Mhm.
How many days does the council have to deliberate? Those
Mhm.
are the ones that I have right now. I'm curious if anyone else would add.
I would only add should 7-8 mirror.
I was gonna
Okay.
say that.
Yes, should 7.
I was gonna say, should we talk about 7-8 at all?
Do we go there?
Or should we decide we're not? Well, I mean, that's part of, should it mirror? And if no, we can leave it alone. Right, okay.
Yeah. Should it mirror?
Oh, the
That's-
reason, are you done,
But-
Catherine? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I want to pause, and I am done. I would just want to see, before we go into deliberating any of them, David, I would just request, does anyone add to that list of sub issues?
Yeah, the issue of, if we go with straight numbers, the issue that it be reviewed every decennial review.
It's-
The
Isn't
If
that
that's
numbers,
already
not
baked
already
in?
happening.
It already
Pardon?
happens.
what do you mean it's already happening?
That
There's
already
a-
Like
happened.
Isaac
There's a review of the
responded to.
charter every 10 years.
Yeah, I know, but this.
All right, you know what? Let's put it down. It's-
If we
it's
name that
fine.
specifically,
It's fine.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
whatever.
if
If
we
you
name
have-
that specifically.
You have numbers, all right, in every 10 years in charters. Okay, so
David, can I add one other thing?
of
Just as we
course,
think about these, it's just, how do I say this? I don't know exactly how to ask this question, but what are people willing to negotiate on? And I'm thinking specifically around the supplemental piece. And maybe I should, maybe I feel hesitant to say this, but I imagine that might be the hardest. I'm imagining that might be the hardest for us to come to consensus on. And I'm wondering about that.
you're wondering whether it's worth the time to do something that we may never reach consensus on?
Kind of, yeah, I'm kind of wanting to ask Al, as you will, because I hear the four of us feeling strongly about the two phases. And if you have clarity about whether you would, like, I think that could be the sticking point.
Before we get to that, though.
Yeah, we might not want to, but this is
No.
what's in my
I
mind.
think that's an excellent discussion. I guess, though, that I still feel that basically after the ballot question was answered no, I heard Al Norman became active in speaking about now changing 7-7, but he always put it in the context of 7-8 being decided this way. Now we get to talk about 7-7. So what I've heard him say all along, and I know that there's a group of people here watching that were part of the group that was strongly advocating not to change it, is that ballot vote is done. We don't talk about that anymore. That's done. People don't want it to change. But we're supposed to now sit here and talk about 7-7 all of a sudden because Al and his group want us to change that. I mean, if we're going to talk about 7-7, we're going to talk about 7-8. Otherwise, I
David.
feel like this whole thing should come to a logical conclusion.
But David, that's
David,
not what
I
you
thought we were
said when you
charter.
started. That's not what you start, and that's not how you started the conversation the first time. You said, let's take 7-8 off. So please don't do that, because I've been in this trying to.
No, this is not my permission. This permission needs to come from Al. Because this committee is created because Al brought a can to the council meeting and kicked it off the table and said, I'm not being heard. So we created this committee so that we could all be heard. But I need to know that we can talk about 7-8. Because Al has a group of people that are sitting here and I don't know what they're going to tell him.
David,
That's not what you
I-
started the conversation.
Can I answer that?
No. Can Isaac answer that first?
David, I think it's not fair for you to be personal to Al on that issue. I think we're here because the council, after hearing from Al, voted that we should look at both 7-7 and 7-8. I think this is exactly what we're talking about. Someone brings forward an important issue, but there are more considerations that need to be considered before the council can make a full decision. I think we're obligated because the council told us we must look at 7-8. We couldn't come to a decision that no changes need to be made in 7-8, but we're obliged to look at it or we're not meeting our mandate.
Okay,
David, I also wanted to point out that I do hope we will not personalize this. But I was also told the night that this was passed through the city council, there were several counselors who said publicly, don't talk to me about 7-8. We did that. We've been there. And I said to Chairman Gwynn at the time of the ordinances committee, why are you including 7-8? We just voted on this 7 or 8 months ago at the time. He said, because the voters told me what they didn't want. They didn't tell me what they wanted. And I thought, oh my Lord, when you vote against something, you are telling people what you want. It's not just when you vote yes. So I don't want to change the number in 7-8. I mean, I did not come into this committee with the idea that I would be spending my time coming up with hearing proposals for different numbers for what the voters said they wanted. I have too much respect for what happened in November of 21. I am willing to talk about almost anything else, but I don't want to reopen the number that the voters ended up with by their actions on 7-8, whether we think they understood it or not. I think they did, but if other people think they didn't, that's their business. But I cannot come out of this committee and face all the people that worked with me on that campaign and say to them, I'm throwing out the number that we worked so hard to get, to keep it the way it was at 337, 300, whatever. I'm realizing that number can change when the review happens over time, but I don't want to spurn that vote. I will not do that. All these other issues that we're talking about, I'm willing to talk about. You've already heard my feeling on 7-8 in terms of what I think it should change to be approving and disapproving things, which is a major change in 7-8. But on 7-7, I'm willing to talk about. I don't like supplemental votes at all. I think they're a waste of time. As I tried to say earlier, I don't think they produce anything new in terms of compromise or education or whatever. I think it's just a punitive measure. But as far as the number, I'm willing to negotiate that, and what the number should be. I think that the idea that you mentioned, David, about the 2.5% being the if there's going to be a supplemental, that should be the supplemental number, which is 338. The initial number, the number 100, 120 has been thrown around. I don't mind Catherine's number of 450. I don't want to go a whole lot higher than that. I don't mind 450. It's higher than 7-8. But I think that you could back into the 450 and be close to it. But I'm willing to talk about all of those things, the numbers, the things that were raised here, the mirroring. I want 7-7 to mirror 7-8, but I don't want 7-8 to mirror a new 7-7. That to me is like not what the voters said they wanted to do. They rejected 7% for 7-8. I don't want to go back now and say to those people, we're ignoring what you did. But what's the need for a hard number, the need for supplemental, Catherine, in answer to yours? I'm willing to agree to a supplemental if, as David said, if the numbers work out, if the total numbers work out and the burden is not so heavy that people are discouraged from doing it. I'm willing to talk about supplemental. I don't like it. It would be a bitter pill for me. I see it completely wasteful. I want the time frame for the citizens to be able to gather signatures to be lengthened. We didn't talk about that. I think you talked about how long how long to, did you have that on your list, Catherine? How many
I
days?
didn't, let's put that on the list.
Yeah,
if
okay,
you
so
can, David,
that's, I
thank
think
you.
that's an important one as well. So on a lot of these figures, I'm very flexible. On the issue of bringing up 7, 8 again, and pretending that there wasn't a vote in November of 21, please don't put me in that position. That was not good to get me on this committee if that's what the purpose was.
How do others feel about that?
I am concerned because we have a mandate that came from the council and it was very clear that we were to look at 7-8. Now, Al is free to say that he doesn't believe there are no changes, should be no changes. And we may not reach consensus on that, or we may reach 4 out of 5 people are in consensus on that, but we can't not look at it. And I feel I'm derelict in my duty not to look at it. I also think I don't think any one individual is an arbiter of what the people meant when they voted in that ballot question. I know myself, I personally voted no because I didn't like 7%, but I did think it needed to be increased. And so there's room for compromise on both sides. People who are unwilling to compromise can't reach consensus.
I just want to also, just in terms of process, remind everybody that our charge is to provide a recommendation to the council. We don't have to come to a unanimous recommendation on any of these things. And so if our recommendation, if we write something up at the end of all of our meetings and say, you know, here's the takeaway from the discussion around this piece, and then here's the discussion around 7, 8, and it was that this number of people felt we shouldn't even touch it. These other people said this. That is fulfilling our duty as well.
How about you, Catherine?
In
2 minutes.
terms of,
Well, how do you feel like we should, I mean, listening, if we go to 7, 8, we have one person who already said that. it's off limits.
I don't feel like I'm ready to, with 2 minutes left to the meeting, to, there's nothing that I feel like I'm hearing Al say that he's willing to swallow the bitter pill of the supplemental, which felt like the biggest sticking point. I'm willing to continue with this process. I'm just curious about how are we structuring the meeting to get to that point, because I would like to get to that point. But I don't, and I was invited to, I mean, yes, the charge is to talk about 7, 8, but I don't feel like there's anything that I'm in the last 1 minute of this to say, I'm in this. I just want to get through it. So
Well, I think we're moving ahead.
Okay.
We've exposed all the issues. We've made a list. We've understood limitations. I mean, we've only met 3 times. And these meetings have been way more intense than many other meetings I'm sure that you've attended. So
yeah,
with 1 minute,
thank you.
1 minute left, let's pick another date. If now,
Yeah, David,
I
can
don't know
I,
how your hands up, but
I'm not going to be able to continue after. Let's meet a time. If you want to say something else, I'm going to need to
no, I
get
just
off
want to
the
meet a
phone.
time. No,
But
pick a
yes,
time.
let's pick a time.
David, is it possible to ask that we have one more meeting?
Oh, I
Oh,
think.
yeah. We
Yeah,
have to
but
have a meeting.
we're
Oh,
already-
yeah. We're meeting
No,
again.
but just one more meeting.
Oh.
To put the pressure on all of us to finish this process and make a recommendation. Maybe one more meeting to finish our recommendations and then to come back and look at them and write them up. But I feel like we've had a good discussion with lots of back and forth. I don't want this to go on too many more meetings. And I was thinking that maybe next meeting we could finish our business.
Maybe next meeting we do some, we actually vote on a few things and see where we stand on the 5. Well, it's really more like 7. I have 4A and 5A, but the number of items on the list, and just kind of go through those and bat them around as if we're counselors.
Catherine, your time frame, I would think that you have more time at the end of the month because everything is weighted towards the beginning of the month.
So I have at least two council related meetings, sometimes 3, until the week of May 1st. But that week I also have a week-long training sorry if this is too much information, but
No, can we push this? Can
I'm
we push-
wondering if we could meet the week of May 8th. That week, I only have one meeting. The week after that, I have two. And the meeting I have that week is on the 10th, May 10th. So
Yeah,
any other night,
I can't meet on the 11th, so it would have to be the 8th or the 9th.
The
But
8th
you
is
don't know
good
if
for
there
me.
were subcommittee meetings.
May 8th.
Catherine, you don't know if you'll have, you think you on.
I
those that
don't,
You
and-
don't know, right?
I don't believe there are currently the last Ways and Means meeting that we're looking at is May 3rd. I don't believe that there will be another one after that. So with that belief, I am okay with scheduling something May 8th or 9th.
Okay, Al, you okay with that date? Either one of
Yep.
those dates?
Yep.
Are you on economic development, Catherine, or is?
I'm on Ways
Derek?
and Means and A&O.
Because
So-
I don't know if you guys will have a meeting in May, but the Tuesday is usually your EDC meeting. I would prefer Tuesday to Monday. I've told David about I have personal situations on Monday, but if it's the only night everybody really can do it, I'll do it.
One more thing, I'm gonna make the next agenda, these 8 things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, we'll make motions.
Dave,
and-
It's 8:02,
Dave,
Catherine, you better go.
to be clear,
Um,
I can do the 8th, but I can't do the 9th. I have a soldiers home meeting on the 9th.
So
Oh,
so the 8th.
okay. The 8th is a Monday. That's fine. I'll do it.
All right, bye, everybody.
Good
Oh,
night,
thank
you.
everyone.
All in favor, say aye.
Bye.
Did we decide the 8th?
Yes.
Yeah.
8th at
Okay.
6
8th at 6
PM.
PM.
I move
Okay.
to adjourn if we need a real one.
I'll second that. Have a
Bye.
really good
Thank you,
night.
everybody.
I third it.
Bye.